Good morning and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Tuesday, the 8th of February. I hope that you're having a really good week, and I just wanted to take this opportunity today to say thank you to everybody who watches these videos and to say thank you for being a part of my church family, because I really do feel like this Church at Home group is an extension of the congregation, the wee congregation of Wainwright and Edgerton. Today, I wanted to say thank you. I don't have a particular topic in mind. I just would like to sort of touch base with you about the Church at Home and what this is about. When we began the Church at Home, these videos, these daily videos, this was at the beginning of the lockdown in November of 2020. Wow, that seems like so long ago and yet so really quickly ago. I started doing these because I didn't know what I would do about being online for worshiping, for leading worship. And Rob and I were going to go into the churches to coordinate and lead worship however we could by video. And I was a bit nervous. So I thought I would just sort of give this a try. And then also because we were locked down, and we were so locked down for a while there, this was a way that I could reach out to folks and just sort of touch base and let them know that their priest was still around, since I had only started really 2 months before in the parish and didn't know anybody. And since then, this is grown to become a really important part of my day during my week. You have allowed me, you have indulged me in talking about things that are my hobby horses, the things that are important to me, in touching on political things, on the current events of our world, on ways of praying, on thoughts about how we are called to be Christians, and really everything from A to Z and back again. This has been a really fantastic opportunity for me to discover ways of thinking about the church and thinking about where we're going as church. If you tuned in for Sunday's worship, you will have heard me preaching about emergence Christianity. And I got to tell you, a year and a bit ago when we started these, having to go online, I was pretty angry about it, really frustrated. That's not church. Church for me has always been gathering in a place like this. I happen to be filming this week from St. Mary's. One of these weeks I'll do everything from St. Thomas, but this week I just happen to be filming from St. Mary's in Edgerton. And for me, this was church. The stained glass windows, the dark colored pews, the organ, ours is a pump organ, and it's covered by a beautiful tapestry right now because we don't have a musician. The altar, the candles, the smell of church, the books that are in the pews, the paintings on the walls, the banners and things like that. And of course the people. Being present with other people, whether we were singing or praying or silent or laughing or crying together, being present with people. That's what church meant to me. So the idea of going online, really I was reluctant. No, I'm not going to be a convert to that, because this to me is church. And to be quite frank, it still is. It still is. Even when I go on holidays, I find a church and I go and I worship with total strangers, and I feel God's presence and I feel filled by the Holy Spirit, and to participate in the Eucharist and all of that is there, and it's a gift. But one of the gifts that has come, one of those pandemic graces that I talk about from time to time, that has come about in the last year and a bit, is a really new understanding, a new way of thinking about what is church and what is the purpose of church. I think I've fallen into a really bad habit of thinking that church is all about filling me up. It's all about me. If I go to church and I hear a really bad sermon, I grumble about it to Rob. Even if he's the preacher who was really bad, I talk about it. Well, if we go out for lunch or we're sitting down and talking about something or having a coffee, I didn't get anything out of that. I didn't feel filled by that. I disagree with that comment. Their presentation style, which I'm sure happens after I preach too. Lots of people probably do that too. But it's all about what I took out of it. If I didn't know the music, then I get disgruntled because, hey, I didn't understand that. I couldn't sing the music. It wasn't familiar pieces. Rather than paying attention to the words or trying to learn a new tune, I focus on how uncomfortable I am and I'm not being fed. And it's occurring to me that in my wedness, my comfort zone being in church like this, I have narrowed down my understanding of what it is for me to worship, and how do I use worship. And I've fallen out of recognizing for myself that that's not the point. I come to worship God, not me. I come to worship a God who sent his son, Jesus, to the cross because of my attitudes about things like being grumpy about a bad sermon or the music not being what I would like it to be. I come to church and I am filled up by the Holy Spirit, not because I am worthy of being filled, but because God, in God's infinite wisdom, and kind of scratch my head about that one once in a while, believes that I am someone who needs to take that Holy Spirit out into the world and share it with other people. And so I have had to, last year with all this pandemic stuff, I've really had to do that mind shift thing about what is the purpose of church? What is the purpose of worship? The purpose of worship is not about me being filled up, me feeling comfortable, me feeling like that was an A-OK sermon, or me sitting there critiquing it. That's not the purpose of church. The 100% purpose of church for me is to worship God, to say thank you, to go before God on my knees, literally or figuratively, and say, I am not worthy to be here, and yet you have made me worthy, and I thank you for that. To give thanks to God for the incredible gifts that God gives me and all of us. And I've had to do some work on that because I've gotten way too selfish and very self-centered and entitled about what worship is. And that's not okay. Then once I started realizing that and thinking about all this online stuff and the emergence Christianity, I started realizing that I need to not be so grumpy about this, the computer, this thing, not being worship. I've struggled with this whole virtual isn't worship. For worship you need this. So we do this until we can get back to real worship. And the fact is that just like I preached in my sermon and when I'm reading about an emergence Christianity, is that the world changes completely every 500 years. It really does. If we look back, we can see it. And what we find is that when we look back on it, we say like, oh, we've grown so much. Like they had such a limited scope then. Look at the scope we have now. 500 years ago, they were just learning to read and having books in their hand and Bibles in their hands. Now sometimes we look back and say, hey, that was the highlight. That was the greatest thing that ever happened. What if 500 years from now, the world looks back on us and says, wow, look how far we've come. They had the internet. They had virtual worship. They had FaceTime and Skype and YouTube. Look what we have now. Look what the gifts that God is giving us to use now that they didn't have 500 years ago. I am not worried that our world, well, other than climate change and things like that, if we're still around in 500 years, I'm not worried that there won't be something, that there won't be a way to worship, or that there won't be things that we can wrap our minds around. This is the way that we worship with integrity. Because 500 years ago, there was no way that anyone could ever have predicted that we would even have women priests behind the altar, let alone books in everyone's hand that they could read, let alone phones to pick up the phone and talk to somebody across the distance, or screens that we could look and see each other and talk to each other. I mean, we are limiting what God can do when we say the way it has been in the last 500 years is the way it should be now. We are called to do a new thing. Just like I was called to do a new thing a year and a bit ago in November of 2020, I was called to start something new. And it is growing, and it continues to grow. And as long as you're willing to watch, I'm willing to do this. Put out these videos every day and just talk about things. And by the way, give me some topics. It's hard sometimes coming up with things to talk about. So throw some stuff at me. If it takes research, it might take a while for you to see the video, but it'll get there. But we need to recognize that we are changing. As long as those of us who still like to have buildings and hymn books and things like that, as long as we're still around, there'll be worship. Whether or not we're able to be paid as priests to lead the worship, we'll have worship. the way we're used to it. But we need to embrace the fact there are new ways of coming together. And that, you know what, this computer thing that I'm looking at right now and you're seeing me through, virtual doesn't mean not real, not anymore. We need to expand our vocabulary and recognize that virtual is just a different kind of reality. And we need to celebrate that, not bemoan it. So I thank you for the past year and a couple of months, the past 14, 15 months of Church at Home. And I thank you for being my online community, for engaging with me and encouraging me and sometimes shoot me down, which is okay. I need that once in a while. And I look forward to the days that are coming, to the months and years ahead of us that will lead us into a whole new way of being church. But what we'll always have in common is that from 2,000 years ago on, is that we will only be church if we are all about Jesus. If it's all about that. It cannot be Christian if it's not about Christ. And so that is what we hold on to, and we let the rest of it grow around us. And we engage with it, and we learn, and maybe we contribute to it. So thank you for being Christ followers with me as we walk this journey, and as we use Church at Home as just one of the many, many, many tools that we have as resources to help us to do this. So thank you for being my online community. It is my pleasure and it is my honor to be here with you. Have a wonderful day. God bless you, and I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel.